Hi there. Before we dive into the episode, we want to tell you about a fantastic biography for all of your reading pleasures. For the Golden Silent Films podcast, books and biographies are just as important to us as the films we discuss. The book we want to spotlight today is Barbara Lamar, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood, written by Sherry Snyder and published by University Press of Kentucky. In the first full-length biography of the woman known as the Girl Who Was Too Beautiful, Sherry Snyder presents a complete portrait of one of the silent era's most infamous screen sirens. In 5 short years, Lamar appeared in 26 credited films, including The Prisoner of Zenda, Trifling Women, The Eternal City, The Shooting of Dan McGraw, and Thy Name is Woman. Yet by 1925, finding herself beset by numerous scandals, several failed marriages, a hidden pregnancy, and personal prejudices based on her on-screen persona, she fell out of public favor. When she was diagnosed with a fatal lung condition, she continued to work undeterred until she collapsed on set. She died at the age of 29. Few stars have burned as brightly and as briefly as Barbara Lamar, and her extraordinary life story is one of tempestuous passions as well as perseverance in the face of adversity. Drawing on never-before-released diary entries, correspondence, and creative works, Snyder's biography offers a valuable perspective on her contributions to silent-era Hollywood and the cinematic arts. We here at the podcast can't recommend this book enough and know you would love it as much as we do. If you want to check out Barbara Lamar, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood by Sherry Snyder, head on over to Amazon. With just a couple of clicks, you will be transported back in time for an incredible life story. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Mystery Machine of the Golden Silent Films podcast, where we will do our best to suss out whether a house is indeed filled with spooks or not. And we'll be enjoying some wacky Buster Keaton hijinks along the way. No matter what, it's going to be a fun time regardless. Now before we enter the haunt, let's talk about the various Golden Silent Films podcast social media outlets. As usual, head on over to the Golden Silence cast on Instagram for all the up-to-date info on this little podcast. And for all of you folks on X or Twitter, just follow at Golden Silence 1 or search for Golden Silence Cast and we should pop up. Our sort of newest social media hangout spot is Bluesky, where you can find us at Golden Silence Cast. All of these screen names and sites will be in the episode description in case you are interested in checking us out. As always, we would love to have you along solving cinematic mysteries with us. At these social spaces, you'll get behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode reveals, and other fun film-related materials. And, as always, you're going to get fun photos of our not-so-crime-solving podcasts, Gizmo and Soda. Also, if you're listening to this program on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Amazon Music, please leave comments, reviews, ratings, or all of the above. Our show has been around for 5 years now, and we've only received 19 reviews on iTunes. We really want to see those numbers keep growing, and you awesome silent film fans out there can make it happen. All of those ratings and reviews help greatly. So, live your best review leaving life and help our show grow and reach fellow silent film fans everywhere. Dropping those reviews gives us more exposure in the world of podcasts and lets us know how we can improve. As always, we are grateful for the feedback and always want to bring you the best show humanly possible. And also, please subscribe to the Golden Silent Films podcast. While our output can be a bit sketchy and irregular, if you are subscribed, you will never miss an episode, and the moment new content drops, it will go straight to your listening device of choice. Now, we are right in the middle of our 5th season and don't want you to miss a second. So, that means you can also go to YouTube, where we are pushing to get 100 subscribers before 2026. So, you know those magic words like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. With all of that being said, this episode is a celebration. Well, technically 2 celebrations. Now that I think about it, maybe even 3, honestly. If we're anything, it's efficient here at the podcast home office. We will fit as much as we can into a single episode, as you may notice from some of our episode runtimes. That brings me back to our dual, possibly triple celebration here. If you are unaware, September 29th is Silent Movie Day, a day where silent film fans worldwide celebrate this classic style of film. Also, September 30th is International Podcast Day, where people celebrate the impact of podcasts, come together to connect the global podcast community, and encourage people to discover and share their podcasts. And in a bit of a reach, this episode releases the day before October begins, so it can be in a way considered Halloweenish. So in summation, all of those cover our shenanigans here at the Golden Silent Films podcast. In the past, we have covered the history of Silent Movie Day fairly often and in depth. We have looked into the history as well as heard from its organizers, one of whom is Chad Hunter, the man behind the Pittsburgh Silent Film Society and Film Festival. We have also dipped into our adventures on this great cinematic holiday. It really is so incredibly amazing seeing how many silent movie lovers all over the world have taken this idea and run with it. With the world loving Silent Movie Day, it seemed only fair to focus on the podcast side of things this year. With it being International Podcast Day, a celebration of the journey we have taken as a show, focusing on silent films seems to be a solid path to take. Now, if you're a new listener, you may not know the lore and the backstory of the Golden Silent Films podcast. The birth of the show really isn't as simple as you may think. The only reason this show exists is my curiosity about silent films. In 2017, 2018-ish, I really started getting into podcasts. And it was through those podcasts that I was able to really dive deep into any topic that I found even remotely interesting. From world history to film production to professional wrestling, I was like a pig in the mud. I had access to so much information that really expanded my intellectual horizons. If there was a topic, surely there must be a corresponding podcast to immerse myself in. And that plan worked. For a while. At that point in my life, my exposure and experience with silent film was largely confined to Nosferatu and Metropolis. Two great movies, obviously, but hardly representative of the insanely wide scope of the silent film universe, to borrow a term. I wanted to learn more about silent movies. I wanted to immerse myself in the lives of the stars of those classic films. I yearned to hear about how exactly a silent movie was made. It all piqued my interest and pushed me to seek out a podcast that would teach me that information I sought. Now that, folks, is where things kind of got sidetracked. There were some great podcasts out there focusing on silence, but not that many. And some of the ones that did cover the silent film world only did so with an episode or two here and there. I couldn't find the immersive and educational show I wanted so badly. I wanted multi-hour adventures covering all aspects of silent film production. I wanted bios, behind-the-scenes bits, and all the weird little side stories and tangents that make a film come to life. But a show that catered to my not always mainstream tastes was really difficult for me to find. So I did what any technophobe would do. I decided to take it upon myself and make a podcast I so desperately wanted to listen to. Once I got the technological stuff kind of settled, I had to figure out what I would discuss. In creating my own podcast, I realized all of the freedom I had. As a listener, you are confined to what the host wants you to talk about, which that's fine and good. But since I was just beginning my silent film journey, I wanted to explore literally everything. Now, in retrospect, that probably wasn't such a hot idea. Well, if I wanted to acquire a bunch of listeners, that is, already the Golden Silent Films podcast is dedicated to a niche topic, and I soon realized that the topics that interested me the most were niche inside of a niche. There were a lot of shows and scholarship out there about Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and the like, but it's the stories, lives, and lore that lie beneath the cinematic surface that really captured my imagination. The deeper the topic, the better. The more obscure the story, the better. The lesser-known life, the better. That journey is what fuels this show, for better or worse. We've done some pretty obscure stuff here on the pod, and our recent expansion to YouTube has allowed us to get even weirder. And we love it, and more importantly, it keeps us excited to keep making this program. Now, having listened to many podcasts over the years, I've learned and heard the terrible fate that is pod fade. Many folks who make podcasts as a hobby burn out, lose interest, or just run out of free time to dedicate to such an intensive hustle. Many a time over the last 5 years, I've actually come close to shutting things down. When listens and interactions and easily quantifiable successes haven't been plentiful, I wondered why I even do this. Then someone like Cena Owen comes along out of biographical left field. The diamond in the rough, if you will, a story worthy of telling, just in need of a storyteller. My shows may not be the best from a technical perspective, but I wholly believe that content-wise, they stand up very well on their own. And if the Golden Silent Films podcast inspires even one person to take that deep dive into silent movies, or any topic for that matter, then I feel that all the hard work has totally been worth it. Now, of course, there are topics and stars that could get us a few more listens here and there, but we wouldn't change our path for the world. And for all of you great people out there on this journey with us, thank you. The fact that each and every one of you spend so much time listening to our stories from the Golden Silent era means everything to us. This truly is a show made with love. And since we are so dedicated to the obscure and the unfamiliar, let's move on from the sappy stuff and talk about a little-known actor named Buster Keaton. I actually hear he's a funny guy. In this episode, we will be watching 1921's The Haunted House, which exists in a myriad of versions on YouTube. You can also watch this hilarious short via Wikipedia or archive.org. Regardless of how you watch it, what matters is that you give this two-reeler a go. It's super fun and is a great use of your 20-ish minutes. Now, if you lean to the physical media side of things, there is a DVD release from Kino Video. This release can be found easily on Amazon as a compilation that also includes The Battling Butler and The Frozen North. By the way, that was me being jocular earlier when I said I was talking about Buster Keaton being an unknown actor. But in my cinematic experience, he certainly is an actor whose filmography I need to see more of. I've seen some of his work, but not nearly as much as I should. So we're going to spend a belated silent movie day, an on-time podcast day, and an early Halloween discussing his hilarious 1921 short, The Haunted House. Is the house haunted? Is it a spooky scam full of scary shenanigans? The only way to find out for sure is a little Golden Silent Films podcast official patented movie discussion infotainment. Since I am but a man behind a microphone, it only seems fair to focus the biography of this episode to Elgin Lessley, the man behind the camera. There is a lot of great Keaton action we will certainly cover in the future, but for now, let's focus on the man filming some of the most famous chunks of the great Stoneface's career. Elgin Lessley was born on June 10, 1883 in Higbee, a small town in Missouri. This future photographer was born of a Civil War veteran and a milliner named Shelton and his wife Orpha. Elgin had two older sisters, Annette and Ora. He would also have a younger sister named Bindi. In 1910, the family relocated to Colorado Springs, Colorado. It was in his teens that he developed an interest in photography. At the time, his interest was still photography, but as the moving picture was still a relatively new specialty, he eventually would take that on. But for now, as time went on, he saw film as a perfect vehicle for capturing images on film. It was in 1911 that he landed his first gig as a cameraman for the American branch of the Méliès Star Company. If you are unaware, this branch was operated by French filmmaker Gaston Méliès, the brother of Georges Méliès. The whole idea of this setup was to distribute his brother's films in the States. But eventually, they started making their own moving pictures and needed camera operators to bring those early films to life. Leslie was able to experience some world travel during this short stint behind a camera here. Gaston would take the company on a tour of the South Seas and Asia in an effort to capture material. This work trip happened in the summer of 1912. Leslie would join the crew in Yokohama, Japan in April of 1913. It was there that he assisted on capturing documentary footage. By May of 1913, the tour was coming to a close and Leslie was headed back to the States. He would end up in Los Angeles, California near his sister Annette. Now with more experience under his belt, Leslie took a job with Max Sennett and Keystone Studios. It was his tenure at Keystone that led to the incredible networking and hobnobbing with some of the best and brightest minds in silent comedy. These connections would have an insane impact on the trajectory of his film career. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves at the moment, though. One of the films Leslie was behind the camera for at Keystone was 1916's He Did and He Didn't. If you want to learn more about this film, rewind back to our second season where we make a full look back at this classic Roscoe Arbuckle short. Aside from this shameless self-promotion, this film is important in the career of Elgin Lessley. In an article for Picture Play magazine from April 1916, we read, Elgin Lessley, the intrepid cameraman, who has the reputation of turning out the clearest films of any Keystone crank turner, was loading his magazines. It was the great work cranked out by Leslie during this run that really impressed Arbuckle. After some health setbacks and money disputes, the rotund comedian started his own studio. It was called Comique, and Arbuckle wasted no time bringing Elgin into the fold. This transition would prove fortuitous as it would bring Leslie and Keaton into the same orbit. You see, a 21-year-old Buster Keaton was there honing his comedic chops under Roscoe Arbuckle. Keaton was an incredible talent and soon was taking his talents to bigger and better destinations, including the director's chair. Eventually, Arbuckle would leave comique and Keaton would take over. By 1919, Buster Keaton was directing his own shorts with Leslie as his chief cameraman. This team-up wasn't just a temporary or short-lived venture either. Leslie worked on all 19 of Keaton's two-reelers and 7 of his feature films. Elgin Lessley was a main cog in the Buster Keaton cinematic machine. Now that sounds like an impressive run on the resume of Elgin Lessley, right? Let's take a look at a few of those legendary products. Now, from what I've often heard, the best place to start is at the beginning. In this case, the beginning is 1920's One Week, released on September 1st, 1920. This is such a fun movie from a visual perspective. I actually was lucky enough to see this film for the first time at the Columbus Moving Picture Show. It was a new and completely unexpected film for me. The tricks and stunts that were pulled off in this short were unbelievable. The film was chock full of incredible sights and gags that could only be pulled off by folks at the top of their game. For folks familiar with Buster's future works, this short has a lot of ideas and concepts that would only be perfected as time went on. Let's take a minute and turn to Leah Stans and her fantastic article, Keaton and His Cameraman, written for silentfilm.org. In this article, Stans breaks down how the talents and innovation of both men really came together to make some incredible movie magic. Stans writes, "The cinematography of Keaton's first release solo short, One Week, features many of the clean, precise compositions that he preferred. The numerous medium shots and long shots tended to be perpendicular to the action, and gags were captured with an eye toward having as few edits as possible, or none at all. Leslie clearly had a pragmatic attitude toward working with the endlessly creative comedian who might want the exterior of a full-size spinning house captured one day and scenes of its chaotic, whirling interior the next." Collaboration was often the name of the game for these two fantastic film guys. Leslie wasn't just limited to being a talented cranker of the old movie camera. He and Buster were also cranking out some great innovations that would propel the film world forward. Take the 1921 Buster short, The Playhouse, for example. Necessity would be the mother of invention here. While filming The Electric House, Keaton would break an ankle. His daredevil nature finally hurt him, but the movie industry never stops moving. A short was required, and so was a little bit of ingenuity. Let's type our way over to the always amazing Movies Silently website for a description of one of the most famous scenes of the film, and one that surely blew the minds of the movie-going public in 1921. Movies Silently explains, "The start of the short is one of the most famous sequences in Keaton's career. He puts on a complete vaudeville show in which he plays everyone. The performers, the audience, everyone. Most famously, he plays a 9-member minstrel act with all 9 Busters appearing in the same frame at the same time. Another fabulous example of camera virtuosity in the silent era. So that covers the what, but what about some of the hows? Eleanor Keaton, Buster's wife, along with author Jeffrey Vance, would recall this technical magic on display in the special effect and trick shot laden short, The Playhouse. Eleanor would explain, "In these early days of motion pictures, all of the special effects were created inside the camera on one piece of film. For the scene in which 9 Busters dance in a minstrel act, the same film was exposed 9 times. Elgin Lessley would block out the entire frame except for the small space occupied by Buster as that one character and crank the camera at an exact speed." The article continues, "Leslie would then rewind the film to that precise point, and Buster would do his exact performance exactly the same again. To make sure each time he did the dance it would be in synchronization with his other performances, Buster danced to banjo music played to a metronome. The charmed co-work between the two would continue on strong throughout the roaring 20s. In fact, some of Buster Keaton's most legendary works came from this creative union. To that end, let's jump about 4 years ahead to April 21st, 1924, to be more specific. That would be the release day of Sherlock Jr. At that time, the film received mixed reviews, but time and audiences have been kind to this movie and really appreciate it as something visually special. This film is a great look at sheer, pure creativity put on screen. Having just recently caught this on the big screen at the Edwin S. Porter Film Festival, I can attest to what a wonder this film really is. It was wild to watch so much unbelievable action on screen. The crowd in attendance in Connellsville that night was on the edge of their seats the whole time. It really was a special night, and the insane tricks on screen are still as awe-inspiring today as they were 100 years ago. So let's turn back to Leah Stans and see how Leslie committed this action onto film. Stans writes, "With Leslie's flawless special effects showing Keaton jumping in and out of a movie screen, the reality-bending Sherlock Jr. is considered a technical masterpiece even today. According to Keaton, it was Leslie who suggested having the film's most surreal gags take place within a dream sequence, keeping the main plot anchored in the real world. The shots of Keaton trapped inside the screen with the scenery constantly changing around him in the blink of an eye relied on Leslie keeping precise measurements of the distance from the comedian to the camera for each shot, down to a fraction of an inch." Speaking of Leslie's work in Sherlock Jr., what better source to hear from than Buster Keaton's wife, Eleanor? In the book Buster Keaton Remembered by Jeffrey Vance and Eleanor Keaton, Eleanor would write, Had Buster not had one of the best cameramen in motion pictures, Elgin Lessley, he would never have made Sherlock Jr. Leslie executed the special effects so perfectly that cinematographers and other film technicians of the time went to see Sherlock Jr. repeatedly, amazed by its effects and to try and figure out how certain scenes in the film were done. As the mid-20s came along, the innovative cameraman would take a path of filming away from Buster Keaton. He would head to Harry Langdon Corporation and First National Pictures to do some work filming, surprise, surprise, Harry Langdon films. Now, during this era, Leslie would work with the likes of the aforementioned Langdon, as well as names like Frank Capra and Joan Crawford. Speaking of those three, they would all be a part of Tramp, 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 which was written by Capra and starred Langdon and Crawford. This was my first ever Harry Langdon picture, and I quite enjoyed the tale of competitive walking. The work from Elgin Lessley was very workmanlike here. While it didn't always bear the marks of innovation his Keaton work often did, it's still very visually enjoyable. Leslie put a lot of his experience and knowledge to work in this film. Now, as they often say, all good things do come to an end. And that was true for the tag team of Buster Keaton and Elgin Lessley. The Cameraman, released on September 22nd, 1928, would be deeply personal work for Buster. And it was a long road to this picture, and Buster wanted to get the gang back together to bring this film to life. That meant Leslie, Clyde Bruckman, and Fred Gabori were back in the fold. You're going to hear more about them as we talk about The Haunted House. But that core group came back together to work on The Cameraman. So, to learn a little bit about that, let's take this opportunity to get back to Leah Stans for a look at how Leslie and Keaton would make one last classic film together. Leah Stans writes, After a 2-year sojourn filming Harry Langdon features, Leslie reunited with Keaton to film his first feature at MGM. Keaton had lost his independent status when executive Joseph Schenck sold his contract to the big-time studio, and in hindsight greatly regretted the move. However, Keaton's tenure at MGM did have a honeymoon period. The production of The Cameraman, for which he was allowed to assemble some of his former crew. Leslie's smooth camera work resulted in elegantly done sequences like Keaton running up and down several flights of stairs, and a precarious stunt where Keaton cranks a tin-type camera on a collapsing platform. The Cameraman was the last film the two men made together, the end of an era of thoughtful collaboration. So with that classic collaboration explained and detailed, let's look at another short produced by this awesome team of cinematic legends. That leads us to the world of a troublemaking bank clerk and the house filled with scary spooks and amazing special effects. Joseph M. Schenck presents Buster Keaton in The Haunted House, written and directed by Buster Keaton and Eddie Cline. While we're talking about the crew, let's go a little deeper and see who all was behind the genius of Buster Keaton. It's true that Keaton was a generational talent, but he certainly had a great team behind him. Keaton benefited also from a superb team of people who were able to transfer his vision to film, Eleanor Keaton and Jeffrey Vance would write. Eddie Cline co-directed with Keaton most of the Keaton shorts. His technical director was Fred Gabori, who was responsible for building the sets and planning special stunts and effects. His cinematographer was the highly skilled Elgin Lessley, a Max Sennett veteran. Gene Chavez and Clyde Bruckman, along with Joseph Mitchell, were his top 3 gagmen. Now, the film starts out setting the scene for us explaining Wall Street, the palatial parking place for the bull and the bear, mostly the bull. It's a bustling backdrop for us to learn that New York is not the only town that has its mastermind of finance. This is our introduction to Buster Keaton arriving to open his bank for the day. Me writing down each shenanigan, pratfall, and joke would more than likely take any fun out of this great short. I'll definitely give a few highlights throughout, but you gotta check this out yourself. Anyway, Buster opens up shop and sets things up for the day's banking business. Next, we take leave of the bank in order to be introduced to the villains of our picture and the quote-unquote House of Spooks. The inner title reads, "The bank cashier and his band of counterfeiters have a strong reason for making people believe this house is haunted." This all leads us to meeting that nefarious bank cashier who is explaining the situation to a flunky. He goes over all the traps that will go off should the police try to get involved. We see trap steps that flatten when a lever is pulled, causing everyone on it to slide down. So, spoiler alert, the house is not actually haunted, and we most definitely have a Scooby-Doo situation on our hands. Or is it? With the time for explanation over, the cashier leaves, and we get our first real glimpse of the haunted house with a gate that reads 2619. That address of 2619 wasn't just a random piece of set dressing with numbers haphazardly chosen. Those numbers would prove invaluable to film historians as the years went on. Case in point, John Bankston, in an article for the SilentLocations.com website, takes us on the search for this historic filming location. Bankston, himself called the great detective of silent film locations by no less than the New York Times, takes readers through his and his colleagues' geographic sleuthing. Bankston writes, "My friend, architectural writer Steve Vaught, made this amazing discovery. The haunted mansion appearing in Buster Keaton's 1921 short film The Haunted House was the former Bone Break Mansion, once standing on the corner of Adams and Figueroa. Steve noticed the 2619 street address appearing on the gate, and that the style of architecture seemed to predate 1900. The article continues, "Checking a 1900-era Los Angeles map, Steve found few streets at the time were lengthy enough to have had addresses as high as 2600. Next, by combing through the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps, Steve eliminated nearly every lengthy street but Figueroa. The Sanborn map footprint for the Bone Break Mansion at 2619 South Figueroa matched the Keaton house exactly, which the Los Angeles Public Library online photos confirmed." Bankston concludes by writing, "As it turned out, the house was torn down later in 1921 to make way for the new Auto Club headquarters still standing on that spot. This would explain the home's rundown condition and availability for use as a movie set. Now we leave the house in the film and return to the bank, and Buster doing his bankly duties to the best of his ability, which we'll soon learn those abilities aren't very finely tuned. His first customer of the day needs a withdrawal from the vault. Unfortunately, the vault is time operated and won't open until 9 a.m. She uses her feminine wiles and convinces Buster to fiddle with the clock a bit and open it early. He does this, gets hit by the vault door and falls down, but he does get the money, so that's good. We learn that although it's a small bank, it has a president, and although he is a small man, he has a daughter. Now, this daughter leaves her dad's office just as the shady cashier enters. She chats it up with Buster while her father and the cashier discuss a recent discovery of counterfeit bills in the bank. "I wonder who put those counterfeit money in the bank. I'll ask the police," the bank president tells him. Back at the counter, Buster is giving out money, but accidentally gets his hand covered in glue, which really takes things off the rails, as money is soon super stuck to him, and it only gets worse from there. I can only explain so much at this point, and it is so much better watched. So much small, fascinating comic gold is happening with this sticky situation that any description I give will only lessen its impact. You really do have to check it out for yourself. Now, the glue-filled gaffe only gets more and more out of control. Soon it is escalating to steam, hammers, and eventually an unconscious man. And the recurring glue gag, as multiple people, both customer and employee, end up stuck together, it really is an incredible series of events and definitely worth checking out. And you don't want to forget about the woman who faints after getting a glimpse of a guy's underpants. This segment really is hilarious and needs to be seen. Outside the bank, the dastardly cashier is chatting with his accomplices who, it turns out, will also be robbing the bank. Unfortunately for them, though, it'll be roughly 100 years before the invention of Goo Gone, but I guess you can say it will be a legitimate stick-up in this case. Buster is still struggling to get unstuck as the robbers go in, but eventually he does, only to get stuck to the thieves' guns. Meanwhile, the cashier is distracting the president while his goons try to rob the place. Eventually, the two come out and see Buster with the two pistols looking like he is in fact robbing the bank. Eventually, things calm down and Buster leaves work. Well, he tries to. I say that because he gets stuck in the time-lapse lock of the vault and ends up falling asleep. That night, the film tells us, on another part of town, the Daredevil Opera Company was executing Faust. And he deserved it. This is to set up the next couple scenes from inside the theater as the inept stock company does a poor job of putting on a show about Faust. The group is so offensively bad, they are chased out of the theater. This is where these two stories join up. First, Buster is freed and is able to comically escape the bank. At the same time, the actors are being chased through town. Buster soon runs into the house, causing the authorities to stop chasing him. They are terrified and convinced that the house is haunted. No time is wasted here. The first thing Buster sees inside the house is a ghost floating across the floor. This spooks him so much that he runs to another room. This is the same room with the trick staircase from earlier. As he is examining the room for himself, we see the supposed ghost is a human in a costume. In fact, as Dutch once said, if it bleeds, we can kill it. I bring that up because one of the people chasing Buster sees the ghost from outside and shoots at him, which sends the ghost running, which in turn scares Buster up the stairs, which retract, and he slides down them. This is where the actors, dressed as Mephisto, Faust, and Gretchen, enter the house and our story. This also scares Buster something fierce. Unfortunately, he lights a trick candle which explodes. He carefully then makes his way down the stairs only to fall down the slide again. This haunted house is a real puzzle box of a location for Buster. In his 1983 book entitled The Look of Buster Keaton, Robert Benayoun writes, "The mooning Buster enters into the most devilish machinations and exposes himself to the most merciless secret societies. The mafia in the high sign, the counterfeiters' rigged house in the haunted house, the Tong War, enemy Yankees. Not only that, but he has the difficult knack of turning up inside places that are fatally booby-trapped or electrified places. The haunted house, electric house, prefab house, and other trick dwellings in Keaton's shorts are so many crumbling, unbalanced, changeable worlds where traps, vaults, and dungeons are always within reach, where certainty is undermined by some new peril every minute. At this point, all of our main characters are now in the house together, and that would be Buster, the actors, and the bank cashier and his goons, and the president's daughter. A lot of silliness and misdirection and mistaken identity gags start flying fast and furious. The crooks, though, eventually recognize Buster, and the boss orders the ghouls to spook Buster some more. Eventually, Buster follows some David S. Pumpkins-esque skeletons into a room. He clearly thinks the house is haunted, but we know the skeleton dudes are surely counterfeiters and bank robbers. Buster watches the skeletons build a man. They put pieces together and somehow the man comes to life. This bit here is an incredible use of special effects. It is absolutely seamless seeing what was at first a dummy come to life with no edit, cut, or other cinematic shenanigan clearly noticeable. It was amazing to see, and having watched it a bunch of times at this point, I still can't really figure out exactly how they did it. I'm pretty sure it was just a cut, but dang, it was so incredibly smooth. Back in real life, Buster Keaton was firing on all cylinders as a filmmaker. He was doing top-tier stuff over this run. Eleanor Keaton would explain, "The 19 independent shorts Buster made between 1920 and 1923 allowed him complete creative freedom. There is an amazing variety to them, and in terms of comic invention and technical ingenuity, no one was making comedy shorts better than Buster Keaton at this time." Back in the film world, the paths of Buster and two of the actors soon cross. But quickly those skeleton guys are back, and this time delivering even more scares. Next, we get Buster running into the mannequin man, who is now headless. He runs in terror, only to seek respite on a couch. This rest is short-lived as a ghost emerges and scares the bumbling banker away. The absurdity of things really starts to increase as the movie goes on. The Gretchen actress beats up the skeleton guys. An anthropomorphic bat or mouse creature accosts Buster. Buster gets in some great action on the steps as they pop up and down, causing him to fall and slide over and over again. Before we wrap things up, let's turn back to John Bankston for a wrap-up on the history of the house used in the filming of The Haunted House. Bankston writes, "The house belonged to widowed banker George H. Bonebrake, co-founder of the Semi-Tropic Land and Water Company, Los Angeles. Bonebrake died at home in 1898. By 1902, notorious Arkansas Senator Stephen W. Dorsey, once indicted but acquitted of bribery, acquired the property. The same year, shortly after Dorsey married Laura Bigelow, his second wife, and a much younger woman, Dorsey's secretary sued him, claiming she gave Dorsey wifely love and he was keeping her on the side in a nearby home. Laura Dorsey died at home in 1915 and the property was foreclosed the following year. The Automobile Club of Southern California acquired the property in 1920, completing its headquarters there in 1923. Back in movie action, eventually Buster catches on to the fact that these are all hoaxes. They're humans dressed up as various ghouls and goblins. He even sees the criminals talking to each other with their heads out of their ghost outfit. Now that he knows they are all fakers, he isn't scared anymore. Even when he's surrounded by them, he doesn't bat an eyelash. In fact, he plays traffic cop for them for a bit. Buster then hilariously knocks one ghost out and assumes their identity. A bit later, the authorities enter the house and are eventually face-to-face with the bank cashier / head counterfeiter / bank robber. But the standoff is short-lived, as one of the ghosts takes a gun and holds up everyone. It's Buster, of course. He helps the cops arrest the counterfeiter, but before he can celebrate with the girl, the bank robber hits him over the head, knocking him out. This bit, folks, leads to one of my favorite parts of the film. Buster is woken up by two child angels. They help him up and send him up a crazy long staircase to the pearly gates of heaven. When Buster gets to St. Peter, as all of us will do, I'm sure, at some point, he hands him his paperwork. St. Peter looks at it and nods disapprovingly. He pulls a giant lever and we get one last staircase gag. The steps retract and Buster slides down, and down, and down, and down a little bit more. He finally comes to a stop in front of the devil, who marks on the big board that Keaton is in. Buster is then prodded with a flaming pitchfork by another demon guy. This all leads Buster to wake up with his butt on fire from a lantern or heater or something. I couldn't really tell either way. He wakes up, puts the fire out, and sits with his girl, the bank president's daughter. And that, folks, is how this fantastic horror story ends. Since we have the house mystery wrapped up in a nice little bow, let's talk about the movie itself. This was an incredibly fun cinematic adventure to go on and share with all of you. As a lover of scary stories and haunted houses and special effects and Buster Keaton, this was right up my alley. Any review of this movie should start with the blundering bank clerk himself, Buster Keaton. I loved this short. My favorite aspect of the whole thing was the physicality of Buster Keaton. I know you can pretty much say that about everything Buster Keaton appeared in, but here it is also incredibly true and appropriate. He does so much incredible stuff, from jumps to flips to pratfalls. Buster did it all. This particular film didn't feature necessarily anything death-defying per se, but the gifted actor really told a great story through his actions. And he did it in wildly different ways. At the beginning, it was all about the glue and the shenanigans that resulted from that. By the time he entered the haunted house, the style of physicality was completely different, featuring jumps, flips, and more stuff involving his environment. It was all so great and made for a really fun viewing experience. And the Keaton versus environment material really showed off the acting chops of Keaton. It was a lot of fun watching how he reacted to each absurd situation after another. From the stair slide to being grabbed by a handsy chair, his stone face still managed to exude so much personality in the face of such wildly out of control and absurd events. I also loved how unexpected everything was in this short. As a viewer, you never knew what to expect. When Buster went into each of the rooms, would it be a ghost, a skeleton, a devil trying to gain dominion over Earth for the soul of Faust? Even the props and furniture were not as they seemed. It truly was a madhouse of a film, with each room more unbelievable than the previous. Heck, even heaven and hell pop up out of nowhere at the end. To hilarious effect, I might add. Speaking of the devil, there is a great gag where he catches fire. This tickled me to no end. And it was made all the more hilarious since, as of this recording, I have been fully immersing myself in the world of Faust on a bunch of different levels. And spoiler alert to some future Golden Silent Films podcast content. Shameless self-promotion here. We got some Faust stuff coming up in the near future. But it was still a great sight seeing the devil catch fire, and I crack up every time I see it still. Ironically, Eleanor Keaton would write, the best moments in the haunted house take place outside the haunted house. Particularly funny is the routine of Buster as a bank clerk accidentally spilling a bottle of glue all over his counter and creating chaos. A sequence that borrows from the molasses scene in The Butcher Boy, Buster's first film. Perhaps the most memorable moment comes when Buster is hit over the head after subduing the bank robbers. He dreams he is an angel ascending to heaven. When St. Peter rejects him at the gates, he then slides down into hell, where he finds the devil has been expecting him. With our discussion about ghosts and haunted houses coming to a close, it is time to find out where your favorite silent stars, who are presumably not ghosts, are laid to rest. This is the segment where we join the coolest cameraman on the other side of the camera lens. The cemetery gates. The history, the art, the celebrity spectacle converge in Where Are They Now? Your guide to paying your respects to the photographers who've entertained us so much. The rest of Elgin Lessley's time behind the camera after his work with Buster Keaton was largely uneventful. The cameraman would be his last big hurrah on the silver screen. He never really left the position, though, working from time to time as a second cameraman, oftentimes uncredited. This would continue until his death from a heart inflammation on February 8, 1944, at the age of 60. While his spirit left, his physical remains were laid to rest in the Eventide section of Forest Lawn Memorial Park. If you find yourself there one spooky evening, you can find Leslie in Lot 1247, Single Ground Internment, Space 3. Elgin Lessley contributed to the language of silent film. Actually, his work and innovation changed the entire language and process of all film. While he didn't garner as much attention as some of his colleagues, he still earned a lofty place in the history of cinema, and for that reason we are honored here at the Golden Silent Films podcast to tell what is even an abridged version of his life story. So, as the episode comes to a close, we want to thank you for spending your valuable podcast listening time with us. As this is a celebration of International Podcasting Day, it means so much to us that you download and listen to this show. There are so many podcasts out there in the universe. That means there is so much to listen to, whether it be film-related or otherwise, and we never ever take it for granted that you fine listeners give us a spot in your busy day. Thank you all so very much out there. Did you enjoy this silent version of Ghost Adventures? What are your favorite silent ghost stories to watch on Silent Movie Day? Have you had an evil criminal organization trying to scare you for financial gain? Tell us your story. Let us know all the horrific details at the various social media spots of the Golden Silent Films podcast. To that end, if you have forgotten, we are on Instagram, Twitter, and now Bluesky. Let us know what you thought of this Buster Keaton adventure. What silent and silent-related movies, past or present, do you want us to explore next? Our scary world of silent movie knowledge and experience is constantly expanding, and we always need your input for future episodes here and beyond. Luckily, you won't need to survive a haunted house to use our social media hangouts. You can always find us at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and at Golden Silence 1 on Twitter and at Golden Silence Cast on Bluesky. And again, if you listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, or any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, rate, review. If you are watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment. It does an insane amount for our visibility, and we love hearing your thoughts and ideas. Here we have set a goal of getting 100 subscribers during the year of 2025. Time is running out and we are way behind on our quota, so please subscribe and spread the word so other cool folks can subscribe and listen and share in the fun of silent film as well. We really, really appreciate all of your incredible support, and seeing how much all of you fine folks are listening on all of our platforms only makes us want to make the best silent movie podcast available. So, with all of that being said and behind us, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening. And don't forget, the silents are golden, and the talkies, they're just a fad. From all of us here at the home office of the Golden Silent Films podcast, we want to wish all of you out there listening an awesome silent movie day, an amazing international podcast day, and coming up in about a month or so, a happily haunted Halloween to all of you. And thanks for listening.